Dragonflight Season 1 for Mythic Plus is rapidly approaching, and as Warlocks, we gotta wonder, are we still kings, or are we going to be paupers and struggling in the meta? So, in this video, we're gonna answer that question. We're gonna look at the dungeons as a whole, and how the specs performed in the two dungeons during the first weekend of Mythic Plus playtesting on the Dragonflight beta. Obviously, numbers are subject to changing, so this is going to be a combination of how the dungeons play along with the spec performance as a whole and how it feels. So, starting with the specs and the Warlocks themselves, because obviously that's the priority here. We want to know, are we still going to be good, or are we going to need to maybe shift things around a little? And the answer to that is we're still strong. We're currently, numbers-wise, we're in the middle of the pack roughly, both in raid logging and in Mythic Plus logging. And for a beta testing scenario, this is actually really, really good, because obviously the outliers at the moment, the top 3-4 specs currently, are getting repeatedly nerfed, as are a few others that are kind of being brought down to level. Tanks are now also being adjusted, so they're not doing as much damage, which is forcing us higher and higher in the pack. Obviously, we may see a little tweak here and there to damage percentages across our specs, but as a whole, we're probably going to look at finishing the beta tuning going into release probably in top quarter. Then once Season 1 officially starts, and we have all the raids released simultaneously, as well as the actual Mythic Plus seasons, or dungeons being released, we're then going to have probably another tuning phase, but there's nothing going to be drastic. It's not like Warlocks are all of a sudden going to lose 50% of their total damage. So, Affliction, Demonology, and Destruction are all level pegging at the moment. Each is capable, at least in testing currently, of hitting upwards of 100 to 140, maybe 150k in places that I've seen, and my personal best is sitting about the 140k mark. And that was as Affliction with Grimreach, Dark Glare, and just popping everything on a really nice pack. Now, the single target profiles and where the damage sits, roughly, do vary slightly, with Affliction having a slightly lower average than Destruction and Demonology, but unlike Demonology and Destruction, Afflictions is very, very consistent. There are very few moments where you're dipping below your average, essentially, so it has a lower ceiling but a higher floor of total damage. Destruction dips and bobs a little bit, and again, Demonology has its ramping cycle. So the Destruction peaks and troughs are a little bit steeper, like you know when you're bursting. Whereas with everything that Demonology is currently going through and how Demonology is being built, it feels a lot smoother in its peaks and troughs. And we'll be discussing that damage profile in the video I'll be releasing later today as well. So both these videos will be going live at the same time, and there'll be links in the descriptions to both anyway. The dungeons themselves then, and the ones that we were able to test with the Azure Vaults and Ruby Life Pools. On screen you'll be watching sped up versions of both dungeons. These were dungeons I was actually able to complete, because over the course of this testing weekend, I've probably spent upwards of 12-15 hours trying to do dungeons. And unfortunately, due to tuning and how some of these abilities are interacting with the group as a whole, completing these dungeons has been very difficult. You've had people leave, there have been keys of upwards of an hour. Some have even lasted two hours plus as we've tried to bang our head against the wall. Like the Azure Vault on the left-hand side of your screen was a 53-minute long key. So massively over time, and as a result, I have sped it up to about 550%. And the Ruby Life Pools was in time, but in order to have this video be relatively short, I've also sped that up so it is slightly more forgiving and they kind of match each other up. And hopefully you guys will enjoy it. If you prefer the slower form content and you want me to go through the dungeons specifically, please do comment below and let me know, because then obviously I can release those videos for you and talk about them and have kind of the DPS and what I do differently going into Season 1. But the new mechanics that Dragonflight seems to be bringing into it are rather interesting, and they're very inclusive in that you kind of need to react. You can't kind of just sit back and go, right, okay, I'm just going to go through my rotation. And especially in something like the Azure Vaults, the mechanics are extremely punishing. Like the first boss, for instance, you have to soak these crystalline stems up, otherwise the entire raid is going to wipe. And the same with the final boss as well. You need to kill the fractured shards that come out, and you need to destroy them, otherwise they apply a dot, and you're going to wipe. This does mean that there is definitely going to be, paired with the dungeon scaling, that there are going to be certain walls each week in terms of what dungeons you're capable of doing based on your gear or even your class composition, because they're changing the Wowhead have also released this article, but essentially they're changing the way in which dungeons scale beyond 10. So rather than a plus 8% to something, it's going to be plus 10%, which means in terms of comparative difficulty that we understand now, a 15 in Dragonflight is going to be a 16/17 key in Shadowlands currently, and a 20 key, which is the highest key that we're after, both for loot rewards and probably for something like Keystone Master and things like that going forward. We're then going to be looking at doing what is the equivalent now of a 22.5 or a 23. So there's definitely going to be a difficulty shift going into Dragonflight, but the mechanics aren't convoluted. So they're fairly easy to understand once you know how to understand them. So in that vein, when it comes to Dragonflight's release, I will be releasing guides on each of the dungeons per season to try and help you guys going forward. Now, wrapping this video up, hopefully you've enjoyed it. This has been a very fast look, but again, as I said, this is going to lead into the damage profile and raid video that I will be releasing today as well. So I will catch you there, and hopefully you have a great day. Take care, folks, and have a good one.